Hey guys, GhazzyTV here with another Path of Exile video, and in this one we're going to talk about some crafting. This is not the big crafting project, but rather just a direct crafting guide to help people out with a Dark Pact build and also help you craft other types of items with similar type of methods. So, in the low-budget version of the Dark Pact character, we are using the Evolved Caress Glove. This allows us to get a minus 5 levels of socketed non-evolved gems such as minion life, but we also have a very easy access to scaling the HP for skeletons, which is our base damage output by using Evolve Summon Skeleton in there. And once you click Evolve skill, we'll be able to get 20 seconds duration of an onslaught, which is very, very nice. However, you want to step away from this as soon as you can when you start pushing up to the higher tier maps. And the way to do so is going to cost you some efficiency. So how do we then make up for this loss of efficiency? Because the extra levels of our skeletons will obviously get our 10 of extra damage. This is done through +2 weapons, extra levels on our helmet, for example. Even our amulet has this possibility. But the different options that presents itself by doing this is implicit values from the actual Eldritch influences on the actual gloves. Now, for the optimal damage output, you want to have Unnerve. You can have the lowest tier on this because we're going to hit so many times over that you're going to hit and apply Unnerve with this. And the other influence is the Eater of Worlds, I believe. Yes, it is, which is increasing the efficiency of your marks. Now, since we're only using this mostly for bosses, having it with a unique enemy in your presence would be the best scaling for this. But how do we then craft it, and which modifiers do we need to look at to make sure that our damage output is actually better when we're moving away from the Evolved Caress, on top of the fact that we get some better HP and also some tons of extra resistances? So there's a couple of ways of doing it. The optimal version of it is what you're looking at in game right now, that has a reasonably high life roll, tons of resistances, a minion damage from an essence, and also an open prefix for the damage whilst leeching. And that's something I want to point out before I show you the crafting process of this, is that damage while leeching is insanely effective. Now, there are a couple of different ways of doing getting yourself the modifier to allow you to leech. Normally, in the lower budget options, you can run with a hunter-influenced amulet that allows you to roll chaos damage leech. You can have the Eater of Worlds implicit that allows you to get an implicit modifier, allowing you to actually get damage leeching on the gloves instead of the Evolved Caress, because they can't have this. And the big dick version for a higher endgame would be to get the Glorious Vanity with the Ritual Shadows, but most importantly, combining that with Revitalizing Darkness that gives you this feature as well. Now, this allows you to have the Petrified Blood covering 50% of your HP. By not reserving more than 49% of your life, you always have at least 1% or more unreserved HP, which will then be able to be overleached, which is an insanely good defensive layer for this build and enables this super high sustain for this character, and also allows you to then focus more on damage. So, how do we then craft these gloves? There's a couple of ways of doing it. In my case with these gloves, they were crafted by having a fractured pair of life gloves. So first off, I'm going to show you a pair of life gloves, preferably with an energy shield base by adding 1 AS. I look for life. I'll do a mark like this saying fracture HP. That's the wrong one. So we do it again, fracture life, and say that I want a minimum of 50. So looking at this, I can see that I can purchase Satellite gloves with 68. Well, that seems fine. Here's a pair of Samite gloves. Okay, a little bit higher energy shield. 1 Volorb. Let's move this HP up to 70 plus. And you can see that I can still buy these for reasonably low amount of currency. Here's the 75% percentile Sorcerer gloves, item level 70. And you can buy these to guarantee yourself the HP. Now we're going to take a look at this in the Craft of Exile page instead. So if I then add preferably a... There, thank you. Why can't I click it? Sorcerer gloves. As an example. What's up with this? Can I refresh it? That worked. So, Sorcerer gloves. And I choose the Sorcerer gloves. I'll be in a position where I can see the item level required for certain modifiers. So, for example, life, tier 1 HP requires item level 54. So you can see right there. That is one example of it. Minion damage is an essence. So if I scroll all the way down to... essences, you can see that minion damage is right there from the fear essence all the way up to the highest tier deafening goes up to 30%. This is a deafening essence. Okay, great. I can also go back in game and see that the leech craft, which I actually don't have access to, but since I have it on the gloves, I can see that it's a prefix modifier. So now that we know that we're looking for a life, preferably minion damage if you want to make the big one, and an open prefix, the idea with this is very simple. I would just spam the gloves with Essence of Fear till I have a life roll together with the leech, an open prefix. Obviously, if you have a fractured HP, you would just hit it with essences till you have an open prefix, and that's it. So I'm going to show you this in the Craft of Exile, which is a very good tool to practice crafting. So I'm going to take a create a new item in the simulator, and I'm going to go to the gloves and take a pair of intelligence gloves, since we want energy shield based, preferably on sorcerer gloves. No influence, and then click proceed. In the emulator, sorry. So in this case, we will be able to then practice crafting. So you can use the crafting methods up here and basically practice around and see what kind of approach you'll get. So in our case, we will be using essences. We'll be using Essence of Fear, if I can find it. And preferably the highest tier of it. And then I can see here, I get my minion damage. And in this case, I have a mana roll and a cold damage. So in this case, I would re-roll it again. And now I have minion damage as the only prefix, but no HP. So if I had a fractured life roll, this would already be enough. I can also, in this case, benchcraft the HP and then call it done, but we want to have the bench with damage whilst leeching. So if you're not using a fractured base, which I showed you how cheap they were, I would keep spamming this till I hit a decent life roll. And that's just spamming these essences over and over. Obviously, this is if you're pushing for the idea of having minion damage, which will cost more currency. So in this case, I now have minion damage and a prefix of tier 1 life. I have an open prefix, which will now allow me to benchcraft by going in here to prefixes and then clicking the craft and taking leech damage whilst leeching. The highest tier costs a lot of currencies. You might want to settle with a lower tier because they cost a couple of chaos, I believe. The other one is an exalted orb, which shouldn't be that expensive either. So you bench this, and now we're covered our prefixes. How do we then sort the suffixes? This is where Eldritch currency is very important. So in the Eldritch crafting, what's very important to understand with these things is that if you hover over the Eldritch Chaos, it will tell me that if the Searing Exarch is dominant, it will re-roll prefix modifiers, which we don't want in this case. But if the Eater of World is dominant, it will re-roll the suffix modifiers. So this is how we safeguard our prefixes and focus on recrafting our suffix modifiers on this specific item. So by doing this, we can now see that we have 3 prefix modifiers that we do want to keep, right? So now I want to make sure that Eater of Worlds is dominant. The one that is dominant is the one that has the higher tier on the item. So if I only have no influences and only add Eater of Worlds, no matter how low tier it is, I will guarantee that the Eater of Worlds is then dominant on the item. So by doing so, I will take the lesser Ichor, smack that once, and now this item is dominant by Eater of Worlds. If I add a lesser Ember on this, they would be equally valued, and therefore none of them is dominant. Now that I have this set up, I can use Eldritch Chaos Orbs, which will not touch my prefixes, but completely re-roll my suffixes to the point where I'm happy with it. So in this case, I can see that I got a enemy hit with attacks, life, rage, and dexterity. That's fucking terrible. We're looking for as much resistances as we can get. We don't have a possibility to benchcraft, and if there's an open suffix, we can always slam either with a Eldritch currency or with a normal Exalted Orb. So I would literally just re-roll this till I get stats I need. Well, this build's gonna need dexterity. Here's some dexterity. Intelligence is a bit so-so, but there's some cold rest. I could keep this if I wanted to. Let's just show a couple of other outcomes. Dexterity, lightning rest. Here's a fire rest, but I wouldn't keep a 1 mod. I would probably keep a 2 and slam if they're 2 good mods, but that's it. Intelligence, well, we're not playing a mirror version out of it. Dexterity is really nice. We got intelligence, lightning rest, intelligence, cold rest. You know, whatever you feel happy with and how much you're willing to invest into this. So let's just keep this. Here's a tier 1 rest and a tier 5 resistance and 1 scrap mod that's not worth anything. So now that I've decided that I'm going to keep these modifiers on the item, I will then fix the Eldritch currency implicit. So depending on how expensive they are, and like I mentioned in before, the Unnerve, which is from Searing Exarch, you can do the lowest version of this. And you just craft this because they are so cheap till you hit the Unnerve modifier, essentially. And the reason for this is because of how many times this build is, the specific build being Dark Pact, is actually hitting enemies, allows us to do this with the lowest percent on chance on hit, and we will guarantee to always hit this very, very quickly in a boss fight. So you would just spam this till you hit the Unnerve on hit. Let's Intimidate. Intimidate. Of course, it's gonna take time. Let's just get it. Damage multiplier, hatred, purity, strike skills, blah blah blah, and you would push this all the way till you hit the Unnerve. Come on. Oh, There it is, unearned. And once I've done this, I will now decide what I'm going to do with the implicit of my Eater of Worlds. As I mentioned before, when it comes to the Eater of Worlds implicit, if we go again and look at Sorcerer Gloves, and we go down to the Eldritch influences, which are down here. Searing Exarch, we've already covered. Eater of Worlds, we have Chaos Damage Leeches Life. It has a weight of 2.4k, but it's only 400. This would allow us to bypass the necessity of revitalizing darkness from our Glorious Vanity or even a Hunter Influence amulet, so this would be a good start. If you already have this type of source on your gear or from your jewel, for example, you can then choose to go for the mark effects. And when it comes to the marks, don't want to go for the Atlas boss, but you have unique enemy presence. They have even lower weight. And the way to craft this is the same approach like this. You would take whatever you feel like is worth spending money, like a greater Ichor, and you would do this till you hit a mark effect. Or if in this case, when you unique enemy, you want to have that generically. So if you look through this, that's cold damage leeching, physical conversion, unique enemy, hinder, damage per intelligence. Here's an effect of marks, for example. And that's how you do it. That's very simple. It's a very straightforward craft, but I would recommend strongly to focus on getting a base Pero glove with high base energy shields, such as Sorcerer Gloves or Samite Gloves or any of those Conjurer Gloves, for example, and then having those with a high fractured life to make this a very cheap craft to get around. And I'll tell you this pair of glove does not cost very much to craft. And these pair of gloves is actually used by not just the medium budget or higher budget version Dark Pact. Gloves like this is used by the highest version, like mirror tier version of this build as well. There is no change. It's just the life, minion damage, open prefix for the benchcraft, and then whatever stats you need on the suffixes, attributes, resistances, you name it, and fiddle around with the implicit base of your character's needs. I hope this video was useful, and if you did, if you find it useful, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content. Catch you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe, keep rocking.